72 in Olympia, 76 currently in Oakland, and 77 in Astoria. Cooler down across the north or southern coastline. Mid-80s in the Willamette Valley, a cool 66 degrees in Redmond. A great night to do some stargazing. Enjoy.
On World News tonight, a Russian jet explodes in an isolated case of anthrax. It makes for serious anxiety. The British government says it has the evidence that Osama bin Laden attacked the U.S. President Bush announces almost $300 million in aid to Afghanistan. But will the U.S. bomb the country first and then deliver? And we'll meet an Afghan commander who says he can defeat the Taliban. He tells the U.S. not to attack.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening, everyone. We're going to begin this evening with tension and confusion. There were two incidents today which may have absolutely nothing to do with terrorism. And yet, because they happen now, the very first suspicions were of a connection. First, a plane flying from Israel to Russia exploded in midair. Was it a bomb? People asked immediately. Was it shot down? We do not know, but governments in 3 countries at least are desperately trying to find out. And then this afternoon, the regular White House briefing for reporters was interrupted so the Secretary of Health and Human Services could announce that there had been a single isolated case of anthrax reported in Florida. Again, was there any connection? The government doesn't think so, but given the tension and the confusion, the White House decided to say something quickly. Here's ABC's John McKenzie.
Health and Human Services Secretary Tommy Thompson went to the White House briefing room today, trying to calm fears about the anthrax case.
It appears that this is just an isolated case. There's no evidence of terrorism. I want to make sure that everybody understands that anthrax is not contagious and is not communicable, which means it is not spread from person to person.
Thompson identified the patient as a 63-year-old man living near Palm Beach, Florida. The man checked into a hospital on Tuesday with suspected meningitis. Then further tests revealed he had inhaled anthrax, a lethal disease that settles in the lungs. The patient, described as an outdoorsman, recently traveled to North Carolina. And Thompson says the FBI and Centers for Disease Control are now retracing his steps.
We have our CDC officials there on the ground, and they're going to go through the last couple of weeks, go to the restaurants. He traveled to North Carolina. We've also dispatched people from CDC to North Carolina to the communities that he was there. We're checking with his neighbors.
Anthrax caused by bacteria comes in several forms. Inhalation anthrax is extremely rare. The last reported case in the U.S. was back in 1978. And while it's often mentioned as a possible biological weapon, scientists tonight warn there are several natural sources.
It sounds as though this is someone who may have come in contact with some anthrax spores, which can live, for instance, in dirt or soil for a long time.
The patient has been on a ventilator ever since he arrived at the hospital. And tonight, a spokesman for the local health department warns he may not survive. John McKenzie, ABC News, New York.
And thousands of miles away, as we said this morning, a Russian commercial airliner exploded and crashed into the Black Sea. It was on its way from Israel, carrying 77 people to Siberia. Most of the passengers were Israeli. Terrorism came to mind immediately. But at this hour, no one we know knows for certain what happened or will say so publicly. Here's ABC's Gillian Finley.
As relatives waited for information and assumed the worst, assumptions were being made everywhere as to what caused the crash. Russia's president said it might have been an act of terrorism. Israel, always on edge, suspended all departing flights. Sibir Flight 1812 left Tel Aviv at 9:58 local time, headed for the Russian city of Novosibirsk. At 11:39, the pilot checked in with Russia's air traffic control. Everything was, quote, normal. 4 minutes later, Flight 1812 disappeared from radar. A pilot flying below reported seeing an explosion, and then the plane falling into the sea. Pieces of the plane landed 100 miles from the coast in an area where for the last 5 days, the Ukrainian government has been conducting military exercises. Pentagon sources tell ABC News they believe the plane must have been hit accidentally by a Ukrainian surface-to-air missile. But the Ukrainians deny it, and so do the Russians. The weapons used during this exercise, said President Putin, could not have reached the plane. Israeli officials were also skeptical.
I'm not dealing with speculation. We check thoroughly, and we will come to conclusions.
Tonight, there are only questions. If it wasn't a missile that brought down Flight 1812, what was it? Gillian Finley, ABC News, Jerusalem.
The government of Pakistan said today it has seen enough evidence to warrant putting Osama bin Laden on trial for the terrorist attacks against the United States. The U.S. has been circulating evidence to various countries, and some of its allies are helping make the case. ABC's Pierre Thomas joins us tonight from Washington. Pierre?
Peter, a key U.S. ally says there's convincing evidence tying Osama bin Laden to the U.S. attacks. And today there was new evidence about the final hours of the hijackers. These are surveillance camera photographs of Mohammed Atta and Abdulaziz Al-Amari engaging in ordinary activity just hours before they crashed a plane into the World Trade Center, getting cash from an ATM in Portland, Maine.
This photograph here is of Abdul Al-Amari. You can see Mohammed in the background there.
Filling up the car at the Jetport gas station, going to the local Walmart.
You can see him coming in here, again wearing that two-tone shirt.
Investigators say Mohammed Atta has clear ties to Osama bin Laden. And today, for the first time, British Prime Minister Tony Blair gave evidence linking bin Laden to the hijackers.
I can now confirm that of the 19 hijackers identified from the passenger lists of the 4 planes hijacked in America on the 11th of September, at least 3 of these hijackers have already been positively identified as known associates of bin Laden with a track record in his camps and organization.
ABC News has learned that besides Atta, investigators have tied 3 other hijackers to bin Laden associates through telephone records and intercepts. Blair also said one of the hijackers was directly involved in 2 other deadly attacks against the U.S.
One has also been identified as playing key roles in both the East African embassy attacks and the USS Cole attack.
And Blair pointed out the U.S. has received intelligence that a top bin Laden lieutenant has told associates that he helped plan the September assault.
In terms of our military action or diplomatic action, the United States is on a firm foundation now to proceed.
So far, the case against Osama bin Laden is largely circumstantial, but one source says it still is compelling. Peter?
Many thanks, Pierre. Pierre Thomas in Washington. Still in Washington, President Bush announced today the U.S. is providing a large amount of money in humanitarian aid for the people of Afghanistan, even as the U.S. prepares for possible military action against Afghanistan. ABC's Terry Moran is at the White House. Terry?
Well, Peter, White House officials say that this aid package is designed not just to relieve the colossal suffering in Afghanistan, it's a crucial part of the president's war strategy. Today, more signs of the impending humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. Refugee families near the Tajikistan border receiving food aid. The UN's worst-case scenario in the event of a U.S. attack, 2 million refugees. This morning at the State Department, President Bush announced a huge U.S. effort to head off the crisis.
This is our way of saying that while we firmly and strongly oppose the Taliban regime, we are friends of the Afghan people.
The president pledged $295 million in new humanitarian aid to Afghanistan and neighboring states after contributing $25 million in emergency assistance last week. That now makes Afghanistan one of the largest recipients of U.S. foreign aid. The move comes after moderate Arab states had urged the Bush administration to demonstrate goodwill to Afghanistan's desperate population before beginning any military action.
We're working hard with the UN on refugee issues, and indeed we will work hard with the UN and our partners on the reconstruction of Afghanistan.
In emotional remarks at the State Department, the president implied the aid may signal a shift in U.S. foreign policy.
I see out of this sadness and grief an opportunity for America to re-examine our culture, to re-examine how we view the need to help people in need, whether it be in our own neighborhood and around the world.
The aid package will be phased in, with a lot of it reserved for the coming winter months, and it's going to be administered through the UN, the International Red Cross, and other non-governmental organizations. But, Peter, the big question is, how will the aid actually be delivered?
Thanks, Terry. Terry Moran at the White House. Well, the Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, may have some answers to that. He arrived in Egypt today following a stop in the tiny Persian Gulf nation of Oman. He's still trying to build support for whatever the U.S. military is planning in Afghanistan. And he suggested today that it may be necessary to bomb Afghanistan before it drops food in Afghanistan. So what is the logic there? A short while ago, we put that question to our own John McWethy, who's in Cairo as well.
Peter, Secretary Rumsfeld recognizes that the Taliban does have a limited air defense that would be especially threatening to any slow-moving cargo plane trying to do airdrops of food to starving Afghan people. He says the U.S. will not do these airdrops unless it is safe. So how do you make it safe? Well, you destroy the air defenses. U.S. officials say the plan is to go after the air defenses in Afghanistan and destroy them, and at the same time go after many other targets. Now, this does raise the question, Peter, of whether or not dropping food to starving people in Afghanistan might be part of a strategy to help soften the blow of a much broader air campaign that is certain to follow.
Many thanks, John McWethy in Cairo. By the way, all 18 nations of NATO have now agreed to offer better intelligence cooperation, permission to use airspace, airfields, and ports, deployment of naval forces under the NATO flag, and new protection for American embassies. That news for the Bush administration today. When we come back, the veteran commander who says he can defeat the Taliban if the Americans don't interfere. Organized crime in the ruins of the Trade Center tonight, where there's money to be made. We'll take a closer look. And very briefly, measuring the nation's mood. Better, but not great.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Brought to you by Gateway.
Okay, I'm here. Good. I just wanted to make sure that the new computers are ready to ship. They're ready. And they're loaded with the latest operating system? They're loaded. Shh. And your store guys are ready to teach people all the stuff they can do? They're all set. You know, Ted, you're lucky to have a cow for a best friend. Dogs are so overrated.
Just because you're strong doesn't mean you can't be gentle. That's also true of Imodium. It works on diarrhea often in just one dose. Yet Imodium is gentle on your system. Gentler than you thought, effective as you think. Imodium AD.
Be adventurous. Be plugged in. Be involved. Be powerful. Be yourself. Because it's your choice, your voice, and your attitude. Today's AARP.
It's been 1 week since you looked at me. Cause you heard to the side as I'm angry. 5 days since you laughed at me, saying together, come back and see me. Yesterday, you've forgiven me, but it'll still be today till I say I'm sorry. Make it like vanilla. It's the finest of the flavors. Gonna see the show cause then you know the vertigo is at my door and it's all dangerous. You'll have to sign a waiver. I have a tendency to wear my mind up my sleeve. It's been 1 week since you looked at me. Dropped your eyes to the side and said I'm sorry.
The U.S. is doing everything it can, and sometimes whatever it takes, to cultivate many of the individuals, nations, groups who are interested in forming an alliance against the Taliban in Afghanistan, including veterans of the Afghan battlefield itself. ABC's Bob Woodruff has been to Peshawar on the border of Afghanistan and Pakistan to see one of the commanders the U.S. supported 20 years ago.
In the 1980s, when the Afghans were fighting to push the Soviets out of their country, Abdul Haq was one of the Afghan heroes, the 30-year-old commander of the fighters who liberated Kabul. Today, he is 43, and now he has returned to Pakistan to gather his former fellow commanders against the Taliban.
There's no human rights, there's no job, there's no food, there's no medicine, there's no activity, and the only people have a right is Talib.
For Abdul Haq, the fight is partly personal. 2 years ago, professional assassins murdered his wife and 11-year-old son. To defeat the Taliban, he says he has recruited tribal elders inside Afghanistan who are willing to fight with him. Even some commanders in the Taliban army have promised to defect.
In your contacts with them, they have indicated a willingness to come over to your side.
Not only indicated, we have discussed it and we have agreed to.
Abdul Haq's dream of liberating Afghanistan is not unique. Pakistan's border cities seem to be filled with former fighters hoping to return to fight with or against the Taliban. But Haq is the most well-known commander to emerge so far, and he has the blessing of Afghanistan's former king, who has offered to help form a democratic government if and when the Taliban is gone. The biggest obstacle, Haq says, would be an American attack.
If they just go, bomb, kill, shoot, these people who have nothing to do with that, that will make many people upset, and you will create thousands of Bin Laden. My advice is to the U.S. government, the best thing is let the Afghans do it.
For centuries, Afghanistan has been a collection of competing groups and tribes and sometimes outsiders, all with their own designs on power. Now these aging veterans who triumphed once in Afghanistan believe they can do it again. Bob Woodruff, ABC News, Peshawar, Pakistan.
With two other items overseas tonight. In southwest China, work is underway on what you could call the resurrection of a giant Buddha, carved from a cliffside by hand. It is modeled on the great Buddhas of Afghanistan that were destroyed last year by the Taliban. And there has been further violence today between the Israelis and the Palestinians. A Palestinian disguised as an Israeli soldier opened fire at a bus station, killing 4 Israelis. The Palestinian was killed by Israeli forces. When we come back, criminals at ground zero. The mafia is making money out of the rubble.
I'm every man.
And every woman who ever suffered from frequent, persistent heartburn.
If you've treated your heartburn and changed your diet, but it comes back 2 or more days a week, then you may know about the burning pain of acid reflux disease.
But there's something about acid reflux that I didn't know.
Over time, that acid churning up can wear away the lining of your esophagus.
I didn't know.
I didn't know.
I didn't.
But today, there's a purple pill called Nexium. It's from the makers of Prilosec. Just 1 prescription Nexium a day gives many people complete resolution of heartburn symptoms.
That could mean complete heartburn relief.
And importantly, Nexium is also proven to heal erosions in the esophagus caused by acid reflux. Only a doctor can determine if you have this damage. Other serious stomach conditions may still exist. The most common side effects of Nexium and Prilosec are headache, diarrhea, and abdominal pain. So talk to your doctor and call this number for more information and for a free trial certificate for Nexium.
Relieve the heartburn, heal the damage. It's possible with today's purple pill called Nexium.
I'm very proud of my lawn. In the fall, I use Scott's Winterizer. The food enters the root system, stores it over the winter. Then in the spring, perks that grass right up. Scott's Winterizer gives me the last green lawn in the fall and the first green lawn in the spring.
For big savings on brake service, stop into Meineke. You'll get 50% off, lifetime brake pads and shoes. But you better hurry before these big savings are gone.
At Meineke, you won't pay a lot, but you'll get a lot.
Freezing chicken? Only Ziploc double guard freezer bags have an inner layer that clings to seal out air that causes freezer burn. Regular freezer bags don't. Put an end to freezer burn with a Ziploc double guard freezer bag. Freezing steak? Only Ziploc double guard freezer bags have an inner layer that clings to seal out air that causes freezer burn. Regular freezer bags don't. Put an end to freezer burn with a Ziploc double guard freezer bag.
Ocean Spray is fortified with as much vitamin C as orange juice, so it's good for your whole body. Just leave the juicing to us. Ocean Spray. Crave the wave.
To us, it's college football. But to the people of Texas A&M, it's a way of life. Sidelines premieres tonight at midnight on ESPN.
An unforgettable Good Morning America tomorrow.
We're going to take another look at profiting from tragedy. We've reported on people setting up phony charities for the victims of the violence 3 weeks ago, and even selling soil from the World Trade Center to victims' families. And for several days now, we've been asking New York City officials about the mafia at Ground Zero. Today, we learned the city has appointed 4 independent monitors to make sure that anyone affiliated with organized crime is kept off the site. ABC's John Miller tonight on why we have been asking the questions.
Whatever the scene means to most people, investigators say to the mob, it instantly meant money. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office is conducting a grand jury probe into mob-connected truckers who allegedly stole tons of scrap metal and sold it, instead of bringing it to this landfill where it was supposed to be examined as evidence. ABC News has learned that at least 5 of the trucking companies being used to haul wreckage from the site are flagged on a city list of vendors involved in alleged corruption or with ties to organized crime. City officials are now examining the subcontractors.
We don't have any firm information about continuing violations along those lines, but we want to ensure it doesn't happen.
This week at the World Trade Center, Scalamandri Trucking was in plain view. Federal investigators have charged that Scalamandri is controlled by Stephen Crea, the boss of the Lucchese crime family. Many of the workers at the site have been provided by the Carpenters Union Local 608, which has long-standing ties to the Genovese crime family. ABC News has learned investigators are also probing allegations that some workers at the site have been forced to pay kickbacks to mob-connected union officials in order to keep working there. Blake Capitelli is a former prosecutor who specializes in labor racketeering.
You have the scrap metal. You have labor schemes that are pretty numerous.
Investigators say the mob slipped in quickly in the early frantic days and that it may take a long time to push them out. John Miller, ABC News, New York.
On the brighter side of life, Washington's National Airport reopened today. Security is very tight, but many politicians began to use it right away. A Delta flight heading for National was diverted to nearby Dulles Airport because the pilot didn't know a code word that is now required for landing. In the national briefing tonight, the Firestone Company has given in to a government demand and will recall 3.5 million tires the government calls unsafe. This effectively ends the federal investigation of the tires. The government has linked the tires and the failure of them to 271 deaths, nearly all of them on Ford Explorers. In Smyrna, Tennessee, workers at the Nissan plant have voted overwhelmingly against unionization. This is a major defeat for the United Auto Workers Union, which was trying to get a foothold in a foreign-owned factory here. And in Colorado, hundreds and maybe thousands of elk will be destroyed to test for chronic wasting disease, which is also called mad deer disease. There is no evidence that the sickness spreads to humans, but it is fatal in elk and in deer. When we come back, we'll check in quickly on the mood of the nation. There is, someone said today, light at the end of the tunnel.
It was my grandson's birthday. He just turned 3. We're going to move him out of his crib and buy him a big boy bed. I was on chemo then, and I was exhausted. I said to the doctor, I need help. I'm on a mission.
If you're a chemotherapy patient and feel tired and weak, you may be anemic. Ask your doctor about Procrit. Procrit is a natural way to regain red blood cells lost during chemotherapy. And more red blood cells can mean more strength.
Oh, this is a great one. This is a good one.
Procrit is proven and safe. In studies, only diarrhea and edema occurred more often with Procrit than placebo. Procrit is for patients with non-myeloid cancers.
How do you like it up here now?
Good. Call now and learn how Procrit can help you get back the strength you need.
See? What'd I tell you?
Your strength for living.
He takes a lot of energy, but I never get tired of him.
Sunday, my folks come by, see the look in my children's eyes. Something special about grandparents, so I bake King Christmas. They're so special. They're the action, the main attraction. Now I'm showing how I feel. Showing this love of mine with the heart of the meal. My heart to yours. My heart to yours. Pillsbury.
Johnson, I'd like to see some ideas on saving the company money. I'll be back first thing in the morning.
Think. That's the dumbest. Think. Help.
Well, Johnson, Staples. That'll save us a lot of money. You are a genius.
Get extra savings for your business all this month at Staples.
When I started having hot flashes and night sweats at menopause, my doctor recommended hormone replacement therapy, but I didn't listen.
Up to 20% of a woman's expected lifetime bone loss occurs in the years following menopause.
A year later, I went back to my doctor and found I'd shrunk an inch. I went on HRT, and I've been on it for years. My hot flashes and night sweats, gone. I feel great.
HRT is not for all women. Talk to your doctor about the benefits and risks.
The time to protect your future is now.
Coming up next on K2 News, the National Guard will be armed while patrolling Portland's airport, but is one afternoon of training enough? Oregon's budget is in the red. Governor Kitzhaber reveals his plans for the shortfall tomorrow. Tonight, we'll have a preview. And in the midst of the airline industry layoffs, Boeing employees say they deserve part of the government handout. It's next.
Tomorrow, new details on the terrorist network, the investigation and exclusive video made by terrorists revealing how they operate on World News Tonight tomorrow.
In case you came into the broadcast late this evening, we began with two incidents in different parts of the world that may have nothing to do with terrorism. A Russian passenger jet exploded and crashed in the Black Sea, and in Florida, a man is suffering from anthrax. But there was a lot of tension, and both incidents are under investigation. Finally this evening, yes, it is hard to get through all this. We check in with the country every day as best we can to see how people are dealing with these attacks on the country and all of the ramifications. Today, the Pew Center for People and the Press said they'd been polling again and found that 40% of Americans are still depressed about the attacks. But that may be progress. 2 weeks ago, 70% were depressed.
You really don't have a choice but to get on with your life and just move on.
We all mourned in our own way, and we're all coming back now.
There is no getting it out of our minds altogether. The Pew people found that 25% of Americans are having difficulty concentrating at work, and 17% are having trouble sleeping, and a lot of people are paying attention to the news. Dr. Robert Ursano is a psychiatrist who has actually been monitoring the country's stress level.
We'd expect it to continue to go down over the next 2 weeks, although at a somewhat slower rate. By 1 month, we might think that most people will be back to baseline.
This doesn't apply to people who lost someone close, or who lives close to ground zero, or who is still working there. But in the country as a whole, the shock is fading. And Americans are actually happy about one thing: the strong sense of unity after the country was wounded. That's our report on World News Tonight. Don't forget Prime Time Thursday later this evening, and tomorrow on Nightline they're going to have a special town meeting about all this. I'm Peter Jennings. We hope you have a good evening, and we'll see you tomorrow. Good night.
Five years ago, an eerie foreshadowing from this firefighter trapped at the World Trade Center. Tonight, hear his stunning story of survival. Plus, from Hollywood bad boy to the West Wing's voice of compassion, how